Well, for more reaction on the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster Briefing, I'm joined by security expert Rory Steyn. Good evening, Rory. Thank you very much for joining us. What we're hearing really is, especially in the hotspot areas, there's going to be a lot more policing. There's going to be more Defence Force members on the streets doing patrols and monitoring roadblocks, because those are the areas they want to concentrate on in terms of controlling the virus. But at the same time, many concerns raised about the way the security forces are actually doing their job. What would you say are the important guidelines for them to get this right at this time?
Well, first of all, good evening, Sally. Good evening to everybody watching. Thank you for inviting me onto your show. So my concern is that Minister Cele hasn't clearly stated what the purpose of the roadblocks and the checks at all of these hotspots will be. I think that every citizen in South Africa understands that as long as every government effort that is being made, irrespective of which organ of state it is, should be aimed towards preventing further spread of the virus, not pettiness like arresting somebody who is sitting on his surfboard in the middle of an ocean close to nothing and where it's impossible to infect anybody. Surely there is better use of time, number one. Number two, you move towards the issue of legitimacy. The citizenry, all of us, need to see that our government and our law enforcement officials are acting reasonably. Firmly, yes, but reasonably, not pettily and having rules for the sake of having rules, because then you start to lose legitimacy, and I don't think any government can afford to do that. And I think we've seen far too much of that, sadly, Sally. So we need to be moving towards, so if there's going to be roadblocks and spot checks and whatever, fine and well. Tell us what the purpose is, what people should not be doing. I'm not saying forewarn where there's going to be law enforcement action. I was a cop for nearly 18 years. I know how this works. But there needs to be a reason for having a roadblock. And as I said, all of the reasoning should be towards the further spread of the virus, not pettiness.
It's an interesting point you make, that it also takes up the time of police when they should be doing more important things, arguably. And it's interesting that the police minister yet again reiterated that if you are caught in your car and you happen to have a carton of cigarettes with you that you've taken with you to work so you can smoke at work and home again, and you cannot produce a receipt if asked, you could be in trouble. Now, I think this is unfair on a number of levels. First of all, no one would have known if they stocked up before the lockdown that they had to keep the receipt until now. But secondly, doesn't it leave it open to abuse? You say you were in the force for a long time and you know how cops work. You also probably know that some cops would use an excuse like that to make trouble for that individual. Am I right, or am I being a little too cynical?
No. I think that, you see, again, sadly, the cynicism that many of us feel, and I would hazard a guess that it's probably the majority of South Africans are cynical to some degree about some of the way that the lockdown, the COVID-19 lockdown regulations have been implemented. And I think that the cynicism is because of exactly that we've seen this inconsistent approach. Perhaps there wasn't sufficient time to prepare our law enforcement officials. But I think that this thing, it grows at such a rate, and the spread of the virus moves, and the issues that our government are dealing with move quickly. And perhaps we're playing catch up a little bit. And the focus, I agree with you, the focus could be better placed. The time and the energies of our law enforcement could be better used than concentrating on whether or not somebody's got a carton of cigarettes in the vehicle and where they procured them. Certainly, there are other issues. There are bigger factors. There's just better use of our law enforcement officials' time than that.
We also know that alcohol will be permitted for sale between Mondays and Thursdays during normal trading hours. There's been so much talk about alcohol, and it's a very contentious issue. Do you think it's going to make policing more difficult, or do you think it's actually a good thing because it'll stop police having to perhaps guard liquor stores, which we know many of which have been looted?
Yes, I think it's a bit of both. I value the freedom of every South African to be able to go to the local liquor merchant and buy a bottle of wine or a six-pack of beer. I get that. I do, however, think that the initial reason, or certainly the reason as I understood it, given for the ban on liquor sales was because of the fear of domestic violence. And I think that what we are going to see on the 1st is an absolute crush. We're going to see queuing. We're going to see issues there because people are just desperate to get their hands on liquor. And I question whether or not we're going to, again, be ready for that. I would hate to see a rise in violence against women and children attributed to liquor sales. But I think that it's, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't with this liquor sale issue. I, like anybody else, enjoy a good glass of red wine. I enjoy a cold beer. Well, not now, it's freezing, so you don't need a cold beer. But I do have concerns about that, Sally. I think that the way to deal with it is to probably allow those sales, but to keep an eye on it. And I would hate to see the police's time being inordinately,
Rory, my last question to you is one for people watching. If you're stopped at a roadblock, and if as you say, there's a lack of clarity about why these roadblocks are in place, so we don't quite know what we're going to be met with at a roadblock in a hotspot area. What is your advice to citizens about getting properly through these roadblocks in the right way?
Well, the first thing is not to become confrontational, to be polite at all times, to be reasonable. If you feel that the officer is being unreasonable and appealing to his or her good grace isn't getting you anywhere, then the next step is to ask to speak to his or her supervisor or commander. And even then, when you're speaking to the commander or the supervisor, just please maintain, keep your cool and be reasonable and polite. That goes a long way. No cop likes to be looked down upon or to be, treated in a sneering manner as if they're inferior and the work they're doing is inferior. That's a recipe to go nowhere fast. So we need to respect law and order like we need to respect any authority. And as I said, that always goes a long way when you're talking or trying to understand why or what.
It's a very good point that you make. Thank you very much. And of course, so many of our officers are out there trying to do the right thing as well. Thank you very much. That is Rory Steyn. He's a security expert.